Hello and welcome to the third tutorial already of this series where we learn project succession, a node-based pipeline automation tool. Um, this session we actually finally plug down some nodes and we want to build a very simple Hello World workflow which will teach us how to read files, write files, and log to the console. Um, Let's start with a trigger. We can obviously exchange the trigger. This workflow is trigger agnostic, so we can trigger it every day. We can trigger it just manually whenever we start the workflow. We can do different conditions. But in our case, what I want to do is I just want to start the workflow as soon as we deploy it. So in this case, we can just press space to open the search menu and then look for start, right? And there we have the trigger always trigger node. This automatically triggers whenever we start a workflow. And next, we need to obviously print something to the console, ideally hello world. So let's say we have a log node which will print something to the console. And we connect these two. Let's save our just freshly created graph under, save it, succession, tutorials. Let's create a new folder, hello world. And in here, we just create our little folder called, our workflow called hello world. Cool. Now that we have saved this graph, we can go into the deployment dashboard and deploy the new graph. Before we do this though, to see what it's actually doing, let's open up our console. The console will be really useful to see like, hey, this graph is actually up and running. So if we now deploy our new graph and we say we want to deploy this hello world JSON file, we directly get a lot of information here, and hello world is actually now up and running. It currently is not active because it finished. But let's double click on it to open it up again. And here we see how it resolved the graph and then how it actually printed to the console. Like this is the logging. Where we see, okay, the trigger always fired at a certain timestamp. This is not hello world though, right? This is a timestamp and we want to have hello world in the console. So what we can do now is, instead of just, you can also just redeploy it from here, just so you see, and then we get even the information directly in the node. But still, this is not hello world. So what we now want to do is we want to have a provide string node. And this node will actually allow us to use a custom string. By default, it provides the string, but we do want to, let's make it like this, so you see even better what's going on for now. So this node here will do nothing else than just output the string in a data block. So now we can just type in hello world. And if we plug this in here, our log, if we clear the log here and we update it we now get the hello world value printed. We could leave it at this one already, but I already promised you we want to also save and load files. For this, we do have a read-write files node. This one here, and let's write. We have different options here: write lines, read lines, append, write, etc. So we just write what we have here in our content, like in our string, right? So what we want to do is, let's put the log to the side. It's still going to execute. But what we actually want is we want to write a certain content here, right? We can either also type manually hello world in here, but then this is detached from what the log does, right? Alternatively, we could do soft linking by giving this an alias and then referencing this alias here in a script, in a little parameter script. This is like a little more advanced because it involves parameter scripting, and we're not going into this yet. The easiest part is obviously just to take this output and plug it into the content we want to write. And now we're going to write this string to an absolute file path file. Obviously, I could just select here this file path, but I want to make this a little bit more interesting. I want to instead get the working directory file. And this is basically the location where this JSON file is located. And now what we can do is we can just join this with a path join node. So we join the directory with output.txt. And now we have a file path which is always at the side of the JSON and where we get an output.txt. We can just plug it in here. Deploying this again will now result in, 1 second, yes, will now actually result in this output.txt being written. Let's see if it also contains our content. Yes, hello world. Very nice. How can we read a file though? Well, all it does is we don't have here the pass-through data, which is coming in, and we have the file content, which is going to be read, right? So let's say we don't just have one file here, but we duplicate that file actually. Well, one copy is enough. Let's rename this to input data, and we say hello world from a file. We write this into our input data. So we now want to, I just move this over to a second screen so you don't always have to deal with that. But the next thing is, instead of hard coding our string in here, we want it to be driven by that input file. So we duplicate with Command D our write file node, put it into read mode, and let's put this up here a little bit. Um, so what I'm currently doing is I'm just connecting the working directory just to keep paths relative, right? So I want to do the input data.txt here. It's all relative to our current working directory in this case, because we join it always with this path. Okay, nice. And we can delete our output file writing for now because it's just getting complicated. But if we now deploy again, we get here hello from a file. We basically did read this file and logged it to the console. And exactly the same as I just showed you, we could also write it to different files, etc. We could manipulate the string now. But this is topic of another tutorial. One very little thing is, let's do an interval trigger to showcase you a little bit of the power. So instead of just triggering it on button click, which is nice but requires manual intervention, we choose an interval trigger and we just say every, I don't know, 3 seconds we want to print that. So let's get our time here and do a string. I think it's a concatenate strings. So we get our provided string as a string A, put in like a little arrow here to see the time date, and then we log actually that. So we don't just have the hello world from a file anymore, but we also have the current time in a format. And if we now deploy this, nothing happens. But now every 3 seconds, we get like an update of the string with the timestamp. So this is just like we could close this now and it will continue running. So it's a separate process which just runs in the background. You don't have to have this whole tool open. This is it, and it now runs every 3 seconds consecutively. Hope you like it and have a wonderful day. Cheers.